Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is Monday, February 3rd, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. I'd like to welcome all those in the audience. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dan, would you be willing to read the school board norms?
Yes, I will. The board-developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, execute all duties of the school board in compliance with North Dakota Century Code, properly prepare for meetings, and commit to assessing board effectiveness and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Dan. Moving on in our agenda, we don't have any public communication. Any conflicts of interest that the board would like to declare? Any conflicts of interest? Aaron?
Declare conflict for the case of negotiations.
Okay. Jacob? Okay. Any other conflicts? If not, moving on to our consent agenda, would you like anything removed from the consent agenda before we start? Or questions or clarifications? If not, is there a motion? Motion by Dan to approve the consent agenda, second by Jason. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Moving into our regular meeting, we have nothing under recognition. Under correspondence, we have a thank you from Jennifer Redfern for the remembrance. Under reports, we have no council people here today, okay? We have, under D, we have strategic plan progress monitoring. Number 1, strategic focus 5, resource management and planning goal 4. Dr. Leck?
Thank you. You have the presentation in front of you as well, but strategic focus 5 is resource management and planning. And you'll remember this goal is one of our goals in which we are reviewing or analyzing all of our existing compensation and benefits and providing at least 3 improvement targets. So if slide 4 in the deck has our executive summary. So, you know, we have looked primarily in the last year. We have negotiations with our certified staff every other year. And so in this past year, a lot of that focus has been on support staff. As the board is aware, we commissioned a regional and school compensation study related to our support staff. And then in the spring, we continue to look at that as a finance committee and make recommendations that come before this board for if there is any equity adjustments or if there are other areas that we want to continue to look at. Including our non-teaching professionals schedule, then we'll look at those with a goal, obviously, of having competitive wage and benefits for support staff. And then another area that we looked at in the past year is adjusting our pay periods. We had, you know, quite a bit of discussion about that, and we targeted having 2 pay periods a month for our support staff. We did see. And the feedback we've received has been very positive from that change. But we had seen and had discussions with the support staff that was a hurdle to taking a position with the school district was that 1 pay period per month. And so that shift has been well received. Our improvement strategies and recommendations I'll talk about a little bit in greater detail. And honestly, 2 of the 3 we've talked quite a bit about, so I won't talk about them a ton. But the initiation of a child care program, along with parental leave that's in this, or the potential to enhance parental leave that's on this board agenda, is one area. We have talked before about the creation of total compensation and benefit reports, and that'll be provided per year. And the last one, which we haven't talked a lot about, is we are exploring a benefit portal. Right now, it's not very streamlined. You know, that's a paper pencil, or individual meeting kind of process. It's a little time intensive for folks, and we're looking at seeing if there's an opportunity for us to do that through a portal so they could review and update benefits through that portal instead. So that's something we're exploring right now. Of course, considerations, any change we need to make as it relates to compensation and benefits need to be sustainable, and they need to be aligned with our strategic priorities, and negotiations need to consider the future and current needs of staff. So just a little more detail about that multi-school compensation study. The board approved support staff wage schedules. We looked at 2 areas, or targeted 2 areas that were the least aligned, and those were our custodians and our paraprofessionals. They had the greatest level of disparity, and so that was the first stage that we looked at, or was making some change there. As I said earlier, the Finance Committee does that analysis every spring, and so we'll continue to look at that study and see if there's other changes. But overall, there was a 4.2% increase made for that wage schedule. Again, we're going to look at those in the spring of 2025, and the pay periods, as I stated earlier, were really well received, and I'm glad that we've made that change. It seems to have made a difference to staff. The improvement strategies and recommendations, and I love the name, the Little Blue Jay Nest. But that's the child care program. That's still on track for August of 2025. And there will be a really pretty significant cost savings in monthly costs. And then, as we have shared earlier, there would not be a requirement to hold seats and pay that those monthly amounts during the summer to hold your spot. So that's additional savings that we'll see that staff taking advantage, or that are eligible to take advantage of that child care program, will see. The total compensation and benefits statements, that'll be done before the end of the fiscal year. And really, the intent is just to articulate all of the salary, wage, health, and benefits to our staff, and just quantify, what those are. Very common in industry, less common in the public sector. And so we wanted to mirror what those looked like, and we have a good sample draft of those, and we're appreciating our business office staff that are taking that on. As I said earlier, the Employee Navigator, an online portal that we're going to use or that we may use if it's cost effective to do so, to streamline the review and updating of employee benefits. And then we've also had lots of discussion around parental leave as a benefit, and if we want to enhance that as well. So those are really the improvement strategies and recommendations. Other considerations, when we tackled support staff and looking at making that pay change to twice a month, we also surveyed our certified staff as well. Our assumption originally was, let's look at everybody, and while the feedback and the survey results we got were very much supportive of that consideration. Not everybody, but in general, a significant portion of those respondents said that they supported that idea, but the negotiated agreement doesn't allow for that. So even if 100% of staff had wanted to make that change, we couldn't have done it for our teachers because it's specifically stated in the negotiated agreement that they are paid monthly. So if that is something that is desirable to change on both sides, that would need to be negotiated to do that. But just an awareness, and it's just a consideration. As I said earlier, anything that we are doing has to be sustainable, should be aligned to our strategic goals. I put in, the third bullet I put in is, over the past couple of years, we have made some fairly significant change to the Health Insurance Committee. The voting membership has changed. And I want to give a lot of credit to our Health Insurance Committee members for really diving in and what I would consider modernizing the plan. And they've done that, made all of that plan design change, created a very healthy health insurance plan without any change to that annual appropriation from the board. And at some point, plan design change alone isn't going to be able to sustain that fund. So it's just something to be aware of. Whether that happens in the near, whether that happens now, whether that happens in the future, that's going to have to be a consideration because I don't think just plan design change on its own is going to do enough. Although the Health Insurance Committee has done a fantastic job in recent time, and as I said before, anything you do needs to be aligned to strategic priorities. But with that, I would stand for questions on this and a recommended action to approve.
Any questions from the board? Comments? All right. Is there a motion for this item? Motion by Aaron. Second by Melissa. We have a motion, a second, to approve the strategic plan progress monitoring. Number 1, strategic focus 5, resource management and planning goal 4. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. That did remind me that we may want to have a health insurance committee report at some point in the future. Dan, we can maybe work on that. So, under board education, number 1, strategic competency, teachers using J1 and H1 visa. Dr. Leck and Heidi Boudreau. Thank you for joining us, Heidi.
Thank you. I'll let you.
Yeah, thank you. This was a really fun board education to prepare for. I really enjoyed this. This has been a growing market in North Dakota schools over the last 3 years. And I want to preface this whole presentation with saying there has been a great level of maturity in this market from placement agencies to schools and understanding what the needs are. And I don't in any way want the assumption to be that this process is lesser than. The teachers that hired through this process are lesser than. This is simply an expanding market, and I have been extremely impressed with what I've seen in the last couple of years. I was not one of the early adopters to this. I wanted to allow this whole market to mature, and I wanted to see how other schools were managing this process. But I have been very impressed with what I have heard and what I have seen from schools that have utilized teachers on J1 and H1 visas. And I have been very impressed with the process that's in place, the vetting that's in place on both sides. And actually, Ms. Badeau, if you could talk a little bit about, before I jump into this,
Sure.
the vetting that goes on. It's because it's not just the schools that are vetting candidates. The agency is vetting the school to see, are you the right fit for these placed teachers? This is highly trained and qualified teachers that are looking for different opportunities. So if you could.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience, been a good experience, and I have to agree. We've talked about it over the years, and we I wouldn't say waited, but we let a lot of others kind of get going, so we kind of knew what the kinks were when we were working in and out. So we have been able to interview some candidates, highly qualified candidates that we've interviewed. But it's not just an interview process. So once that's done, if we feel there's a candidate that we are interested in and we would like to propose to them and offer to work for us, then it kind of goes into effect where there's, and I have the exact name of the company, but a company that vets both sides. So they vet us as an employer to see, are we a fair employer? Are we providing what staff need to be able to live and work in our community? What does those benefits and salary look like? What does our housing market look like? What's our transportation look like? And then they vet us as the employers. They talk to us to see, are we a good fit? On the flip side, they also they'll vet that candidate too. So if the candidate says, yes, I am interested, they also vet the candidate and say, okay, this is what it takes to live in this community. Do you have the skills to live in this community? The licensure, that used to be kind of a tough thing when this all began. Teachers would come over with their transcripts, and it was kind of a horse apiece if they were licensed through ESPB, but now that's all taken care of before they even get here. So they've already taken the praxis and have had to pass that. They've already had their foreign transcripts evaluated to ensure that when they get here, they're able to be licensed here. So it's kind of one of those things that, they could say no to us. And they could say, you know what, you're not the right fit for our candidate. So it's very much, you're kind of courting each other. Yeah. Where I think I think sometimes the perception was people just come and this is how it is, but it's not. It's a pretty strict process
Yeah,
for us to have candidates.
It really is, and I only was able to, be there very briefly, but in an interview, I was very, very impressed with the process, the candidate that I heard just a bit from, very highly trained, like I said, very high level of professionals. So I was really pretty encouraged. And 3+ years ago, we had schools really exploring it out of necessity. And we had small rural districts in particular. There's a district that every certified staff member they have is a J1 employee, or on a J1 visa. A couple of years ago, I believe it was Grand Forks Public School District that hired 13 or 15. And that was very early on. And like I said, I wanted to see the process mature a little bit, but I have become very, very comfortable with going through these agencies because they have the vetting. But we wanted to walk through a little bit of board education to understand, because when we talk about J1, H1, there are differences to what those are. There's benefits and derailers to really either side of this, but at the end of it, there are. It is a new pathway that we have access to that we didn't have access to, 5 to 10 years ago, to help us with areas that we positions that are hard to find. So a J1 visa. This might be what you are more familiar with. This is a temporary, so we hear a lot more about our J1 visa teachers than we do our H1. So the J1 is temporary. That's about 3 years. You could have some extensions, but that's a temporary visa. There's fewer steps. It's faster. It's easier to process, and it is designed as a cultural exchange. So it is less expensive, about $1,000. There's fewer immigration requirements, although there are some. And then it's limited to 3 years. So one of the downsides is you have this teacher, it's the individual for 3 years, and they may not be coming back to you. They have to go back for 2 years, then they could come back and come back to you in 2 more 3-year installments. So there are some limitations that way, but they do have that opportunity for up to 2 extensions, 2 1-year extensions.
And just to be aware as well, whether it's with the J1 visa, if the teacher comes to us, we're not locked in per se. They follow the same type of teacher negotiations that all of our teachers here do. So obviously, just like anything, we're hoping for a very high quality candidate that we don't have a concern or an issue with. But say something does come up, they would be a non-renewal just like any other first-year teacher that would come to us in the district. So that's not different for somebody on a visa.
There are some community and cultural requirements from the school district and from the teacher. So the teacher must, because this is a cultural exchange type of program, they must be a participant in community activities and events. They have a requirement to present on their culture to the school and to the community. Some things to think about. Teachers Council is the agency, and so we would utilize legal counsel through that program, and we may have some requirements to support payroll assistance or compliance. So if we were to go down this road, there would be some learning, that would happen in some of these areas, but nothing that we feel would be a hindrance to moving forward. The H1 visa, that's a long-term, so that's a permanent visa. As one could imagine, it's a permanent process, so it is more costly. It is a little bit more complex. It's renewable annually, so there is an option for permanent residency. So a little bit more expensive, $4,000 versus $1,000, and then there's some other processing costs as well. But the longer term, you get a little greater benefit of certainty. And again, as Ms. Badeau said, this does not lock you into anything. It simply gives you options. So there's other H-1 visa requirements. One of the challenges that schools are seeing is the limitation on the number of visas that are available. You might have a great candidate, you might want to move forward. There aren't available visas. So you might, if you're putting all of your eggs in that particular basket, you better move quick because those options could, especially as this becomes a more commonplace strategy, you're going to see more visas being utilized. So there are different ways that you can try to do that. Work with an agency or a sponsor is typically the way that schools are utilizing this. Some of the commonalities between the two, J1 and H1, again, J1 temporary, H1 permanent. Teachers can leave after 1 year, or from the other side, if it's not working out, districts can make that choice as well. There is requirements to ensure that the candidate meets, has licensure, is eligible to get licensed or credentialed. They must contact ESPB before this process starts. And the school district does need to help with housing, and that doesn't mean that districts have to find housing. They have to help gather information so they can find housing, or the agency can help find housing. So we aren't in the housing business, but we are responsible for helping that process. And then, of course, we would also help any individual acclimate to our community, whether they are new to us from Wishick or they're new to us from the Philippines. We would want to make sure that that individual is comfortable in our community, and so we would have that responsibility as well.
And that was another thing that I found very interesting. And I said, is there anything that the company themselves do? So they also have, they have Facebook pages. They have different things for individuals that are in North Dakota to be able to connect with each other. So they find some commonality and some of that cultural awareness. And we do actually have some teachers actually in Cheyenne Valley that are from the Philippines. So we actually have some teachers that are fairly close to us in this general area, and that's just special education. So that doesn't count the general education staff that are out there as well from the Philippines.
The last slide that I have has to do with interviewing and selection, and I will just say, the process to use for H1 and J1 visas are no different than any other process we use. We have a rigorous process, and we want to make sure that we have the highest quality individuals, regardless of where they come from, and we want to make sure that they are good fits for the culture of our buildings and our communities. So, I feel like the process we would use is very, very similar. Regardless, I think we have done a very good job in this district of aligning our needs to individuals and finding high-quality professionals and high-quality staff in general. So, to me, this is just a continuation of the good work that we already do. Some other logistics and support things that we have outlined of how this process works. The biggest things that you'll see as a difference is the level to which we need to support and help to integrate an individual into the community. There are different legal compliance considerations. These are individuals that are approved to be here working. There are specific considerations that we have to uphold, whether that individual has to obtain a license, they have different credentials that they may need to access. And I think I've talked a lot about these already. So just to kind of sum up, the J1 is temporary and more cost-effective, H1 is permanent, and it is a bit more complex, but like I said, it's long-term. But these are individuals that are well vetted locally, but also through their agency, and our district is vetted, and so to make sure that it is a good fit. This is as I said earlier, a pathway that I'm feeling much more comfortable about pursuing in those positions in which we have candidates that meet our expectations and standards. Anything I missed, Ms. Badeau?
No, I just wanted to give everybody just kind of some information about some numbers, because like Dr. Lucht had said, we've looked into it, and now it might be an option we need to pursue. So just so people are aware, the state does look to see how many openings we have in terms of special education teachers. For the 23-24 school year, the state was short 54, and this school year they were short 73. Last year they had 90 teachers on a visa, and this year they have 93 teachers that are on a visa. So there's a lot of openings, and there's a lot of demand, and there's a lot of need. But you had brought up Grand Forks, which was fantastic. I just talked to their director today, and they actually have 30 teachers in special education, and they're moving to an H-1 visa on all of them, because she said they've just had some really high-quality candidates. So that's a pretty big move and shift. When we've had conversations about it and through talking with other units, you know, we're kind of at an infancy stage right now, so J1 seems the best route for us to go to see if this is something that we'd like to pursue versus the H1. But I know through talking, a lot of those who are on an H1 visa now were in those districts previously. They had to go back, but they're coming back to those districts again. So it's been successful for those that have been using the process and using it well.
Any questions from the board? Jason?
Well, I certainly would suggest that we hold interviews on any day other than February 3rd if we're looking at this process. But a couple questions I had, and I don't need a long explanation, but should this come to pass and we end up with a handful of J1 employees, and if it doesn't work out, what have you, are they locked to JPS if they sign anything, or after the first year and it goes well, are they able to continue with the same agreement in another district?
They could. They would have, there would be some fees associated for them,
Right.
I believe, working through their agency to change, but it would be no different than any other employment contract.
Right.
Correct?
Yep, it would be the same as any other teacher if they, after year one, decided, hey, it was great here, but I'd rather be here. They have that right.
Okay. And then second question, I know there was a lot in here about acclimating to the community. Is there any recommendation, like you said, we're in the infancy, and I'm not saying now, but what would the education of our stakeholders look like then on our part as a district? And I guess what I'm saying is introduce the concept to the community maybe beforehand. Is there any recommendation on that, or is it just kind of see what you got and then go from there? Do you kind of get my question? I mean, I don't want to be, this could be a sensitive issue for some folks. So I just, some pre-education, if that's recommended, is all I'm asking for.
If they do it. I completely understand what you mean. In terms of that, they didn't really give a recommendation on that aspect of it. I felt more like we here know our community better, so that was kind of up to us how we were going to introduce that and educate our community on it, if that's the route that we went.
Melissa?
You had mentioned that they're primarily going into the special ed field, and I'm just wondering if any of the schools that have been using this have found that because a lot of the special ed students have communication problems and difficulties already. Is that becoming an issue, or is it actually helping because some of the teachers that are coming in can understand that and maybe are from that same diverse background?
That's a great question. I think that's always been probably the fear for most of us is if we have somebody coming over, are they going to understand what they're saying and things like that. From talking with other directors, and believe it or not, a lot of speech language pathologists came from overseas, and they said they did very, very well. From visiting with some folks through the interview process, we take that into account. Most are very good, very bilingual. There's always going to be some that's there, but overall, they said they haven't had big issues in terms of that language piece.
Yeah, and Melissa, I can say anecdotally from what I have heard, just the interview that I sat very briefly in on, language was not at all a barrier. I was expecting much more of a barrier. I was not concerned in the slightest bit.
Aaron, yep.
Yeah, I think this is just another great tool to add to the tool chest here to, as we work through our resources. But I think there's a very significant strategic point on this, and within our resource management structure there, and it'd probably be a good idea to add that. You know, I would encourage, in my opinion, I think it's something good to add in because it gives us some additional options to consider. But doing it with some structure to ensure that, you know, our HR department can fully support it, the mentorship program and what that needs to look like, because I can see some shifts there, and just making sure that that whole package then it accommodates and we don't leave anybody short on either, you know, the person coming in or the district or the students or the parents or anybody. So just kind of laying out this approach and these options is in a strategic position.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay. Thank you for joining us tonight, Heidi. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Luck, your superintendent report?
Okay, thank you. You have my written report there as well. We are to the season of starting the process for hiring staff, our certified teaching staff for the next year. And so as I've done in the past, you know, I include a little bit of a bio on those that you'll be acting on. The next item I have is the Washington Elementary transition. So, you know, we made that decision as a district to retire Washington Elementary. And since that point, we've had a few different communication points. One of those sent out to our staff to communicate what has occurred, providing a survey, as I've talked about in the last few months, to help with staffing and help us look at what the preferences are. We've started that process. We are just waiting for some staff to complete that survey. And once those are completed, we'll be able to start talking to our staff. So I know many are anxious and waiting, you know, what does the future hold for me? And we just want to make sure to give everybody ample time to complete that survey so we can make the best decisions possible. So I anticipate that having a little bit of a staff update in our next meeting so we can talk about where we're at, who's been placed, where are those placements going to occur, and just to give you a sense of where we're at. I don't envision that we'll have everybody placed, you know, the day after the survey is complete, but, you know, I've spent a good chunk of the day today working on what we already have received, and so that's coming. I also sent out a message on Tuesday after the decision was made on Tuesday to our Washington community to help them understand what the process that was used by the board, give them some additional documents if they had questions. Then last week I sent out a survey, and we started getting responses today for that FAQ. So, you know, what are the questions related to transportation, boundary studies, you know, all of those different types of things. And so I'll use that, and I sent that also to staff. It was a different survey, but same idea. And we'll use that to build an FAQ that can help communicate the next steps for people. So I think those surveys are gonna inform us pretty well on all of these decisions that we make. I had the last boundary study meeting with our preliminary boundary study meeting with RSP and Associates, and they will have the enrollment and boundary analysis, those different analyses, and they'll be complete and presenting to the board on February 17th. They will attend virtually, so we wanted this sooner rather than later. They couldn't make it here face to face, which was unfortunate, but I'd rather have them early than face-to-face. So they'll be here on the 17th, and I will give all that information as part of our packet. We've had a lot of conversation in the last few months regarding parental leave, and you had a great conversation at the board retreat about this, and I tried to encapsulate some of those questions that led some of that discussion in this. I'm certainly available for questions on those if you have any, but these are conversations that you have had, at least all or part of. Some other considerations that I'll just leave this part of my report with. it was suggested by HR that if, we had a lot of discussion about non-birthing parents, and if there's an enhancement for birthing parents, should there also be an enhancement to non-birthing parents? The HR looked at that, and it suggested that 1 week or 5 paid days of birthing leave, non-birthing parent leave, would be an appropriate number just based on what exists from HR data that she had collected. As I stated in my report, 32% offer some kind of paid paternity leave, and the average amount of that time is 1 week. So if you do consider something, that would need to be stated in the motion if you wanted to make that change, because the proposal that I have presented includes change to birthing parent leave. And I had some informal conversations with staff, as I said I would, after the board retreat. And pretty much across the board with the people that I visited with said the most important thing to them was the flexibility that was built into the parental leave policy when it was last changed. And in the past, and that all came from the task force that was put together at the previous negotiations that studied all leave. And during those conversations, our previous policy had stated that those 15 days had to be taken consecutively. And the recommendation of that team, which became the policy that we currently have, was it doesn't need to be consecutive. It can be spread out. Across the board to the individuals that I talked to, that was the most important component. They of course, nobody would say, and almost everybody said this, we would never say no to more leave or paid non-birthing parent leave. But the most important thing to them to keep was that it was non-consecutive. And as we've made that change, we've seen more non-birthing parents access a greater amount of leave if they could spread it out and it didn't have to be consecutive. So that was the most important thing. But as I said, nobody would say no to if there was 5, 10, or however many days of paid leave. Everybody thought, well, sure, that would be great. But the ability to be flexible was the most important. And one other thing that Stacy pointed out, and I thought this was, Stacy Jamtgard, HR Generalist, thought was important for the board to be aware of too, is that, through FMLA, that's 12 weeks for if there is a couple that is employed, that 12 weeks is applicable to both. So if there is paid leave on non-birthing parents, that is taken from the 12 weeks of the birthing parent. So there's 12 weeks combined for if both parents are staff members. So that's the recommendation that I have is the previous parental leave change, and that is increasing from 20 days of paid birthing parent leave from 20 to 40. And then if there is, as I said earlier, if there is a consideration that the board wants to have for non-birthing parent leave, you'd want to state that in the motion for the first reading, because the reading I have does not state that. The Legislative Assembly, which is the last topic that I have for my report, there are currently almost 1,000, probably by now there are 1,000 bills. They're still trickling in. I don't have the ability to, and you don't want me to, talk about every bill of importance. We'll, after crossover, once we see what survives in different areas, we'll dive a little bit deeper as a board. But there are a number of bills just in property tax reform, property tax relief, school choice, compliance and oversight. We couldn't talk about them all, but I have listed a few that I think you could follow. But I've put them into themes. School choice, whether, there's a lot of different ways to talk about school choice, whether that's charter schools or vouchers or ESA's education savings accounts. They have different names and they have different functions slightly, but they're really all about that parental choice. And should public dollars follow that individual choice, or should they be diverted only to public schools, which have universal enrollment and have all of the different public rules that and regulations and oversights that are followed. And I don't mean that to say that other options are not great choices. They certainly are. But this is just about how do we access or how do we treat those public dollars. And I am a product of public education, and I, of course, lead a public school. And from my perspective, options for those dollars do follow public schools. And when we have public schools funded at that appropriate level, then we start talking about other options. But there are many, many different feelings out there on this topic, and I respect all of those choices and all of those perspectives, even when I have a differing opinion. There are a number of different bills on compliance and oversight. One of those, House Bill 1288, I think already failed on the House floor. So the second one that I have listed, I think that failed at the end of the week. 2104, it's a Senate bill, 2104. I do have some concern about this bill, and there's a reason I provided it as an example. To me, it's executive branch overreach. It's concerning to me. It would essentially say that the Department of Public Instruction, the superintendent of public instruction, would have authority to investigate compliance issues and issue a up to 2% penalty of state foundation aid. That feels very heavy-handed to me. I would like to understand the reason and what is the root cause of and I have not heard that. What exactly is the issue that is precipitating such a strong change? And I would want to know a little bit more about the details before I could even understand. And I do think there's limited guide rails to this newfound authority that has me concerned as well. So I think there are certainly questions and concern about that bill. And overall, school districts across the state, not just Jamestown, we have policy to redress concern. And if there are concerns, I would hope that we wouldn't circumvent the locally elected boards to address those concerns. So if there is a concern, for example, on curriculum, we have policy that addresses that. If there's a concern about personnel or a parent complaint, we have policy on how to address that. I wouldn't want to circumvent our policies and the processes that we have in place and simply go from our district to Bismarck to get concerns addressed. That seems like a very far ways away to reach a resolution on an issue. Local control and funding. House Bill 1369 is certainly a bill that you'll want to earmark and watch. That is our primary K-12 funding bill. We'll hear about 1369 for a long time because it's not going to be approved until very late in the session. It'll be the second or third to last bill that's approved. But there are there are things that would certainly benefit districts embedded into 1369. Whether, I have heard, long range, I know what the bill says, and you can read what the bill says specifically, but there's lots of different discussions on what that final, what the final context of that bill is going to be, whether it's a 3% and a special ed factor change, whether it's 4% in that special ed factor change, or 3% and a change to EL weights. Those are, a change to at-risk. Those are all changes that would really positively impact not only Jamestown Public Schools, but other districts as well. So I think there's a lot to look forward to in 1369, but I think you could anticipate seeing somewhere between a 2% and a 4% in both years and some kind of weight change. I think if you're on the high end of 4%, you're probably not going to see weight changes. But if you're somewhere lower than that 4% range, you're probably going to see, if I were a bet man, I would say the special ed factor is the most likely, followed by at-risk, followed by EL, those weight changes. And I'm hopeful that we can advocate to get all of those weight changes. I think they're all necessary factor changes. The other one, and this one disappoints me, but it's House Bill 1381. It moves us farther away from equity. In my opinion, the adjustments that we've talked about before, the 60 mil adjustment, the in lieu of adjustment, those are our equity measures. And 75%, You know, if you wanted to be at full equity, you'd be at 100%. It feels like we're moving further away from equity and not closer to equity. And so that one I struggle with a little bit, and I don't know what, you know, the logic necessarily behind that, but I know that there is certainly some support for the bill. But in my opinion, it takes us further away from our goal, which is equitable district funding. Retention and recruitment, I think there's some good things happening there as well, especially a slight change to 1498, which gets us back to, I think there was an inadvertent change when bonus language was changed in the past. This gets us back to that. And then 1098 does have some scholarships for future teachers, which we certainly appreciate. The spotlight I had this month, or this meeting, was for Adam Gaylor and Heidi Eckert. They have been working really, really hard to look to find partners for our CDL program. In the near future, we'll have some of those partners here and recognize their donations to the program. And without their hard work, we wouldn't be in this position. So we're going to be able to provide a state-of-the-art simulator along with an actual truck for practical experience. And they're going to have a great opportunity to not only build our high school students' capacity, but also an adult education CDL program as well. So I think there's a lot of really good things happening through this program, and Heidi and Adam deserve all the credit for getting those matches in our community. So with that, I stand for questions.
Any questions from the board? Jason?
Back to the Washington Elementary transition, and I know I'm not looking for a specific date here, but the ball is definitely in motion as far as the placements of students and staff. What is kind of your internal deadline per se to, and the only reason I'm asking is because, you know, we made it intentional to make a decision to allow time. Do you have somewhat of a deadline of your own for that?
Yeah, if we had all of our surveys complete, I'd have about 75% of staff placed already. But I don't want to do that until we have all of our preference completed or our deadline is passed. You know, once our deadline is passed, then we'll start placing individuals. So in my mind, I wish we had already been able to go there because I know people are waiting. With students, you will see that. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to push for that enrollment and boundary study from RSP to come before the board as soon as possible. So even though they'll have to be virtual, but I think once those two things are there, we should have an FAQ done soon, and then we'll get a little bit more feedback through that survey, and we'll see I think we'll get a lot of positive feedback around what specifically we need to do. You know, other questions that are in that parent survey: how can we best honor, you know, the legacy of Washington? How can we celebrate the end of this year? What are the transition pieces that will work best for your children? You know, what are the examples? And I gave a couple of different examples, but what are the things that would work for your? We don't want to forget anything. You know, I'm sure there's a lot better ideas out there than what I can think of, and so we want to make sure that those transitions are good for kids. So once those things are done, I think you will just continue to fall into place over the next few weeks or month.
Any other questions from the board? Comments? Will RSP have any preliminary data for, like, I think there's a facilities committee this week. Will they have anything ready yet for them or to review, or is it going to be
We won't
later?
have anything at that meeting,
Okay.
but as soon as they provide that, then I will put it in our folder for this next meeting.
Okay. Anything else from the board? And we also appreciate our community and their investment in the CDL as well. I think that's going to be served well. So moving on in our agenda, nothing under old business. Under new business, we have nothing under activities, buildings and grounds, curriculum assessment, instruction, finance, or operations. Number 6, personnel. A, approval extended contract for semester 2, number 1, Marshall Krieger. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa. Second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for approval extended contract for semester 2 for Marshall Krieger. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved, and thank you, Marshall. B, approval leave of absence for the 2025 to 2026 school year. Number 1, Mindy Skunberg. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa, second by Aaron. We have a motion and a second for approval of leave of absence for the 2025 to 2026 school year for Mindy Skunberg. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, approval to hire for the 2025 to 2026 school year upon successful completion of a background check. Number 1, Elizabeth Wilkie. Number 2, Amber Kropp. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa, second by Steve. We have a motion and a second for approval to hire for the 2025 to 2026 school year upon a successful background check. Number 1, Elizabeth Wilkie. Number 2, Amber Kropp. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved, and welcome to our district. Under D, there's a superintendent summative evaluation timeline, and that's there for your information, and I appreciate Amy. Thank you for putting that all together and including it for us today. Is there any questions on that? Okay. And Amy will let us know if we're not meeting the deadline, so I very much appreciate her help on that, so thank you again. She doesn't always, she's behind the camera, so she doesn't always get the recognition, so we appreciate it. Number 7, approval of reading of policy and procedures. Yes, Dr.
I just wanted to clarify, I made this before, but I want to be really clear about it. You know, if you're going to approve both of them together, I know in the past the board has approved multiple policies at one time. If there are, the recommended proposal that I have is consistent with what I've had in the last, since December. I felt it was important to keep it the same. If there are suggestions or motions to any change in B, DDAE is the parental leave policy and the regulations. You just want to make sure that everybody understands that what is proposed has changes to parental leave. It doesn't have a change to the non-birthing parent leave. So I just wanted to clarify that if you're going to operate them together.
I'm going to choose to keep them separate. And so we have letter A, second reading of IAD, sale of district real property policy. So this is our second reading. Is there a motion?
I would move for approval.
Motion by Jason, second by Steve. So we have a second approval of second motion for and a second for approval of the second reading of IAD, sale of district real property policy. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. B, amended policy DDAE, parental leave, and administrative regular DDAE-AR, parental leave regulations to begin on did I do that?
No,
Wrong?
I just didn't realize
On July 1st, 2025. So that's all under B. So we have a motion to approve as written. Is there a second by Dan? So we have a motion and a second to approve amended policy DDAE, parental leave and administrative regular DDAE-AR, parental leave regulation to begin on July 1st, 2025. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay. No discussion. Assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Number 8, approval of open enrollments. A, Montpelier student to attend Jamestown Public Schools for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa. Is there a second by Steve? We have a motion and a second to approve a Montpelier student to attend Jamestown Public School for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Any items for future agenda? Does the board have any items for future agenda? Okay. At any time you have an item, please contact myself or Dr. Leck. Under meetings to be scheduled, A, we have a facilities committee meeting on Thursday, February 5th at 5 p.m. in the central office conference room. North Dakota School Board Association negotiation seminar on Thursday and Friday, February 6th and 7th. Do we have the right dates there? 2025 at Bismarck. School board meeting Monday, February 17th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room. District School Improvement Committee meeting on Thursday, February 20th, 2025 at 3:30 p.m. in the Media Center at the high school. Are we missing any meetings? Was that? Is right? Okay. Do we have health insurance or anything else that's scheduled and coming? Okay. All right. Yes.
The facilities committee meeting is Wednesday.
That's what I was wondering, is Wednesday.
Okay.
That's what.
I thought you were talking about negotiations.
Yep, I just was asking.
I'm sorry, it's Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday. Okay, thank you for that. I was just asking, I think we have a wrong day there. So thank you for that,
I'm sorry,
Jason.
I thought you were asking about negotiations.
Yep. Facilities Committee meeting is on Wednesday, February 5th at 5 PM in the central office conference room. So, and these will be also posted. So anything else that we're missing? Okay. So those are all the meetings right now that are to be scheduled. Next, we have the agenda item is possible executive session to discuss negotiation strategies. Is there a motion? Okay, no motion for that. Then moving on. Monthly superintendent evaluation, section 1, goal and vision setting, and section 5, operations and resource management. Please complete that. There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.